Welcome back to part 2. And here I'm going to talk about being creative. And of course, that's kind of a hard thing. It's like you can't say to somebody, do this and this and this and this, and you'll be creative, because it kind of defeats the purpose. So I have my little cheat sheet of some notes to talk about. And the first thing in terms of creating is this idea that it can't happen if you don't actually try to do it. So let me state something else, that sometimes you'll just feel like, oh, I'm not in the creative mood, or I'm just not, I can't, it's just not happening, and you got to be in the right mood. And that's true to a large degree, right? That it's hard to create if you're not feeling creative. But what's even truer and what's even more important is that the reverse is very much true, that if you don't create, you won't, right? That if you don't sit down and try to create, you're never going to create anything. In other words, if you sit down, you might not create something, but if you don't sit down, you certainly will not create something. And let me share with you a couple books that I read that I found quite helpful. And the first was just a set of essays by Daniel Pinkwater, who's this crazy children's book author, for the most part, and writes these hilarious, crazy books. And he did or perhaps still does, a radio spot on NPR, and these were collected in book form, a set of essays. And he talks about being a writer, and that one of the things that he trained himself to do was to just sit down at his desk, behind the typewriter or computer or piece of paper, pencil, whatever form you're using. Sit there for like an hour, and maybe write something. Maybe you don't, but you don't do anything else. So you're not sitting there, checking Facebook and writing emails, and you're just sitting there saying, I'm going to sit here and try to write something, and maybe I will, maybe I won't, but I'm training myself to be there and be in a position where I can write something if the mood strikes me, etc., etc. And eventually, he worked it up to 2 hours, 3 hours, for whatever, to whatever point it is that you feel like I should be, writing a 8-hour day. I don't know. And I think that in many ways is this one big secret behind creating, is just finding the space to do it, giving yourself the time. And I'm, it's hard. I certainly don't do that all the time. And another book that is basically talking about a similar thing is Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art, which he talks about the idea of resistance, that there's this external force that is preventing us from creating things, and that gives us bunches of reasons to not create, and whether how much of that you believe in. I do think it's quite an interesting and useful concept. And so again, he stresses the idea that the key thing to do is to be able to sit down and try to create. That is the way to get to have something happen, and to you're never going to get in that creative mode if you're just thinking, well when I'm going to write the next great American novel when this spirit strikes me, the mood strikes me, it's not going to happen. So again, I would stress that just set aside some time. Like if you want to try and do more in terms of writing music or arranging music or whatever, just set aside some time without any expectations. It's not like, I'm going to write an amazing piece here in this next half hour. It's just, I'm going to try to write something, and whether it happens or not, the important thing is that you set aside that time. And then in terms of, what do you do? How do you create something? And I think you got to see me, like in the first, I kind of like the first video in this Arranging Greensleeves series, because you get to see me, I have this structure of Greensleeves, and I'm playing around with it and figuring out, do I like this? Do I not like this? Play around with that, play around with this. And sort of tasting, maybe, as it were. I'll keep this, or no, I'll throw that back. And that's certainly something that can happen. Sometimes maybe you'll have a clear idea in your mind. Maybe you'll hear something in your mind and you're just trying to get it on paper. Maybe you sit down and you're just doing some free playing with no idea of trying to capture it on paper or anything. You're just, and it doesn't matter whether that's good or bad or whatever. You're just having fun exploring, sitting down with the harp and just exploring the sounds you're creating. Play around with weird pedal settings. And so that idea of just playing around and discovering and having fun, and all that can be one way to get your creative juices flowing. And again, as I talked about in Greensleeves, it was nice to have that structure. That's another way where you can, it maybe makes that, maybe the blank page is too intimidating, but or feels too intimidating, but having, oh, here's this tune and I'm going to create the accompaniment, I'm going to maybe create some variations, that structure can help actually make it easier to create something. And so I guess the important thing is just sort of trusting yourself to see what happens, see what comes up with. You're just playing around and trusting yourself. And then in terms of sort of knowledge-based skills, in theory, you don't need to have taken advanced theory courses in order to write a wonderful piece or write a wonderful arrangement or anything like that. It is, I would say, it's very helpful to have a basic understanding of chords and chord structure and how that works. And rhythm, basic understanding of rhythm and how to notate it. But apart from that, I mean, knowing advanced theory doesn't make any sort of guarantee that you're going to be able to create some sort of wonderful piece. And it may be helpful in some certain situations, but for the most part, I would say that time is better spent actually playing around, trying to create something. So don't worry if you feel like, oh, well, I need to know more in order to write a piece. And on that same sort of idea, I would say, be gentle on yourself, because sometimes we can be very harsh critics. And there's that balance of you want to, you saw me in that first episode. I was like, do I like this? Do I not like this? If you're sometimes as you're creating, you're trying to, discerning is the word I have here. You want to be discerning. You want to listen with a discerning ear to try to say, yes, I like the direction this is going, or no, that's interesting, but no, or no, I don't like this at all, but not be harsh. And you might say, like, imagine you were cooking. You're cooking something new and you taste that and you might say, this is really good. Yeah, I'm definitely keeping this. Or, this is okay, but needs a little more salt, or needs a little more, I don't know, thyme or whatever. Or you might say, ugh, this is terrible, let's throw it out. But if you do say that, it's, be gentle on yourself that it's terrible, well, interesting, let's throw it out. Not, oh, it's terrible, so I must be a terrible person in terms of creating things I can't create. It's just, well, you don't like this, that's fine. But don't be harsh on yourself. And that leads me to sort of my final point, which is that you are creative. It doesn't really matter who you are and what you've done. You definitely have the ability to be creative. Which that isn't to say that you're going to, you're not going to be writing the next Beethoven symphony if you sit down. But that you are creative, you can create stuff, and that the quality of whatever it is that you create will probably improve the more you do it over time and as you get more experience. But that whether you're just feel you're a rank beginner or not, you can sit down and create something beautiful. That you can you are creative. So that's the point I want to end this episode with. That you should definitely feel like you can go ahead and sit down and try to create something and see what happens. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't, but just keep doing it. And if you'll find, I think, that the more you do it, the easier it will get, and the more times you'll finish and say, "Oh, I really like that." So have fun creating, and do check out my new website design. And I will see you in 2 weeks' time. Cheers.